Hello everyone, I want to welcome you to my YouTube channel. This is Steve coming back with another video for your enjoyment. I know it's been kind of a while since I've uploaded a video. We're still doing the machine language project, but I really haven't come up with a whole lot lately until I decided that finally I was going to do it, which basically is going to be kind of a long path if I can make it through this. And this is going to be a guide for machine language for beginners for the Commodore 64. Now, hopefully this material is on base as much as possible. I did do a lot of research through a lot of various books, which I'll show you here in just a minute. And I put together a giant Word document, and amazingly already this is teaching me things I didn't even know. I'm beginning to learn stuff I didn't understand, and I'm pretty excited about that. So to go over this, just a few books. This is one of the more popular books, Commodore 64 Map of the Commodore 64. It contains all the memory locations and addresses that we'll be talking about in either this video or in coming videos. Now, this is one of my most valuable ones. I found a lot of good information in this book. It's really old. It's like 1983, but it's got a lot of good stuff for guiding you through how to write and set up your own machine language programs, even though they call it a semi-language there. This one was pretty interesting, too. I've given credit in the book also, but this one's got a lot of good examples, and it's got more detailed information on specifics and stuff like that, and I think this was more where I got some of the electronic stuff too. Oh, and speaking of electronics, this book is really good if you want to learn machine language and learn about the electronics also, because Jim Butterfield apparently had built computers and everything, and he talks a lot about the chips and how the data buses work and just how everything is controlled from underneath and, you know, down to the machine language. It's pretty interesting. So this book I've showed many times, Machine Language for Beginners. This one, you can see it's for the Atari, VIC, Apple, Commodore 64, and PET CBM computers. It's got a really good guide. It's got some good examples explaining how the status register works in pictures and how memory works in pictures, so it's kind of interesting. So trying to see what else, I guess I'll just move on to this one. This one is Commodore 64 Exposed. And this one I found a lot of good information about more descriptions of some of the items, like the immediate values and index registering, which we'll be talking about, and stuff like that, to kind of give me some examples. There was also some, in the back of here, there's some, I don't know if you can see that, but there's some machine language program ideas that I was going to eventually use in my program later. This one is Intermediate Commodore 64. Another really good guide, and this one actually kind of breaks down some of the specifics that I was looking for. Right now I can't seem to think of what that is, but I wrote it all down on a piece of paper here, so I could probably refer to my charts. The Intermediate Commodore 64. So, I found some stuff on there on bank switching and in some program examples and IRQ and stuff like that. This one is called the Supercomputer Snooper. And this one has also a lot of good examples. It's got some great graphic examples that I use later. It's got explanations of how the bits look in memory and how calculations work. I found a lot of good stuff in this book, actually. I was pretty surprised that there was a lot of good information and just for putting together some of the material. This one I kind of skimmed through. I just found some of the diagrams and indexes in the back of the book I kind of used, but mostly the examples were pretty generic and I really haven't pulled anything out of there. Although there are some good examples here on the stack and stuff like that. I could probably use that later when we get into that. This book is obviously a great resource for looking up all the mnemonics, which we'll learn about in the registers. Commodore 64 Programmer's Reference Guide contains pretty much everything you want to know, and I can show you an example of that real quick here. So, for example, if you see this is like a chart laid out showing you exactly what the address modes do and stuff like that. My camera's just not capturing it, but it's got them all listed there, and you can just, if you don't know how to use them, you can use this book and look them up and see how they look and kind of use them from there. And this is the machine language book of the Commodore 64. I wouldn't say I found a whole lot of stuff in here, just some specifics I was looking for that I'll probably be using later for like the when we get to the AND, the OR, and the XOR stuff, the logic operators, that'll be some good stuff to use later. And then Peeks and Pokes for the Commodore 64. This is an older book I've had, but it's got some good examples of how the bits are broken down and how they work calculations and stuff like that. So it's pretty good. This was another one I do have, which is the Commodore 64 Assembly language. This one I'll probably use later when I would look up specific program examples. And it's got a lot of good examples here explaining how the carry bit carries over, how the rotate right and left work. And before we get into all this stuff, but there's some really good stuff there. So those are just some of the books I've skimmed already. You can see it's intensive. So let's get this started. Okay. So this is my guide here, Machine Language for Beginners for the Commodore 64, as I explained. And I'm just going to kind of read through this. Let me just zoom it in a little bit here. You guys can see it. And because a lot of this information is actually taken from the books, but as we go along, we can start talking about some of the stuff. So this video here is probably going to be more of me reading stuff and just hopefully picking up and maybe explaining specific stuff when we come across it. Because I can't really go over any program examples right now. We're just going to have to learn the information up front, and then eventually we'll start touching the instructions and start playing with, CB and PRG Studio. So a machine language program is made up of a bunch of instructions or statements that execute an assigned task. Changing the border color, moving a sprite, reading a disk drive, etc. The advantage of writing in machine language is that it's very fast. This is because it is the computer's native language. Essentially, it is processing at a very low level known as binary. We will learn more about binary later. Now, one of the most important things before I go into the next part is really knowing where to store your program in memory, and that's why we're going to be covering something called the PC, or the program counter. So the program counter constantly increments the program instructions. This is actually slowly entering new data into memory, one instruction at a time. But like I said, we'll see this later in CB and PRG Studio. It counts the steps in a program. The PC is a 16-bit 2-byte register which can store a full-size address number up to FFFF, which is 65,535 in decimal. And the $ with the F, that's the hexadecimal. We'll cover that later. Its purpose is to count the address number, and the number that is stored in the PC will be increased by 1 each time an instruction is completed or when another byte is needed. Each time the number in the PC changes, another byte of memory is selected, so that this is the way in which the CPU, the Central Processing Unit, or also known as, in the other books here, the MPU, or the Microprocessing Unit, can keep itself fed with bytes. When the MPU chip is ready for another byte, the PC increments and another read signal is sent out. The PC is denoted with an asterisk equals in machine language programming. And then, of course, you're going to have an address following that, but we'll see that later. An example may look like, as shown here, the asterisk equals hexadecimal 0800. This starts the program at memory location hexadecimal 0800, which is 2048 in decimal. And then I just put some of the reference material where I found this, and these are the books to give them credit. So ROM and RAM. Memory must be unreserved at the PC to prevent any crashes with the program. Also, memory and ROM cannot be overwritten. Trying to write in ROM and then an empty areas of RAM will leave gaps in your code. So I also got something in here called definitions. Whenever something comes into explanation, I figure that maybe people don't understand. I'm trying to put definitions out there for you. So ROM is read-only memory. As I mentioned, it cannot be overwritten. And RAM is random access memory. It can be overwritten. Also, it is necessary to use a large area of memory to reserve room for your program. And hopefully we'll cover that later. But there's specific areas of memories in your Commodore 64's memory that are dedicated to writing computer programs. So for example, when you're working in CBM PRG Studio, you're not going to be using BASIC, so you can actually use the area of BASIC's memory. Next, we will go over the instructions used in machine language. Each example will usually contain a description of the instruction, a program example in machine language, sometimes there will be basic examples, a graph to illustrate information and data, or a chart to show the result of a program instruction. So the whole purpose of this is to kind of break it down, and you'll see not only do I do the definitions, but I also break them down to show the examples. This will be the actual instruction program or the program, and then a graph. Sometimes you'll see graphs or charts, screenshots, and then the data, basically to show the calculations and the numbers. Now we need to learn something about what's called the accumulator. And the definition of accumulator is, this is the main doing register of the MPU microprocessor unit. The MPU is actually known as the Commodore chip that performs the processing. Sometimes this is a 6502 chip, 6510, etc. It just depends on what chip is contained in your system. Now this next part is pulled out of a book, but I'm going to read it. Various machine language instructions allow you to copy the contents of a memory location into the accumulator, copy the contents of the accumulator to a memory location, modify the contents of the accumulator or some other register directly without affecting any memory. Also, the accumulator is the only register that has instructions for performing math. And you can see, here's where I gave credit for the book. I found it in one of the books you saw earlier, that big fat one. This one right here, of course. The MPU can load a byte, meaning that a byte which is stored in memory can be copied to another storage in the MPU. It can also store a byte, meaning that a copy of a byte that is stored in the MPU can be placed in any address in memory. And remember, the MPU is that chip. It's known as the CPU, but it's that chip that kind of handles all the tasking. The MPU also contains a logic set. Logic actions compare the bits of 2 bytes and produce an answer, which depend on the bit values that are being compared and on the logic rule that is being followed. The 3 main logic rules are called AND, OR, and XOR. Another set of actions is called the jump set. A jump means a change of address, rather like the action of go to in BASIC. Essentially, it can jump to a particular place in memory inside the program. The microprocessor can be programmed by sending it electrical signals. That is the purpose of a machine language program, which is to carry out, as I mentioned, a set of instructions. Below is a picture of a chip that could be housed inside your system. And it just depends. Everybody could have a different Commodore 64 system, so you may not have all the same chips. You may also like to think of it, this is talking about the machine language program, as a robot being programmed to do whatever you ask. However, you have to be very specific. So if you tell the robot to open the door, it will actually first have to extend its metallic arm out. You'll actually have to walk over to the door when you first think about it. Grab the doorknob, turn it, and push it before the door will even open. So you see the series of steps there. There's a series of steps the robot has to take just to get that door open. And the same thing is with machine language. You have to break it down in steps. Machine language accomplishes this with a lot of repetitive instructions that are embedded together to create instructions to carry out a specific task. And down below here is the picture of the chip I was talking about. That's the MPU. So also, since I talked about byte, I had put a definition for a byte. A byte contains a value between 0 to 255. More of this will be explained later in detail. System memory. Before we delve into the instructions, it is important to understand how memory on a Commodore 64 works. Your computer is 64K. The K is known as kilobytes, which means 1,000. The Commodore 64 can communicate with 64K, or 65,536, which is actually calculated as 64 times 1,024 bytes of memory. Each of these bytes of memory can store a number from 0 to 255. I might have repeated this earlier, but excuse me on that. The system can sometimes read and write information from any of these 65,536 locations by using its address, a number from 0 to 65,535. Now we'll learn about something called bits. Bits. Each byte is made up of 8 binary digits called bits. These bits are the computer's smallest unit of information. They can contain only the number 1 or the number 0, but when combined, they can be used to form any number needed. A single bit can only be a 1 or a 0. If two bits are combined, though, the number increases. An example here is showing 00, 01, 10, 11. Now this is going to get real technical at this point, but this is really good information. I think I found this, if I'm not mistaken, in this book, if I recall. Actually, I have the description down here somewhere, but anyways, next we'll learn about binary. This system of numbering is known as binary or base 2. It works much like the decimal base 10 system. In the base 10 numbering system, the rightmost digit is known as the ones place and holds a number from 0 to 9. The next place to the left is known as the tens place and also holds a number from 0 to 9, which represents the number of times the ones place has been used in counting the number of tens. And I tried to put a chart down here so I can explain it, hopefully a little bit better. In the binary system, there is a ones place, then a twos place, a fours place, etc. The bits are counted from right to left, starting with bit 0. Here are the values of each bit. So you can say that bit 0 is equal to 1, bit 1 is equal to 2, bit 2 is equal to 4, bit 3 is equal to 8, bit 4 is equal to 16, bit 5 is equal to 32, bit 6 is equal to 64, and bit 7 is equal to 128. Excuse me. If all the bits are added together, that's 128 plus 64 plus 32 plus 16 plus 8 plus 4 plus 2 plus 1, they total 255, which is a maximum value of 1 byte. So that's the whole point of this, is understanding. When we do it later, you'll see charts in that, and you're going to see these numbers again, but this is basically how they're calculating the bytes. And I actually left that on another line. I probably need to fix that. I just noticed that. Oh well. I should have just went. But anyways, so the next thing we're going to learn about is something called hexadecimal. And hexadecimal is very common in machine language. There are some people who don't like writing in it. I used to be one of those, but I highly encourage you to write hexadecimal because it's very close to binary and it's how the computer sees the information anyway. And I think I might talk about that in here. But it is also important to learn what hexadecimal addresses are. I have included information found in the book Mapping a Commodore 64 below for more clarity. One other numbering system that is used in speaking by computers is the hexadecimal base 16 system. Each hexadecimal digit can count a number from 0 to 15. Since the highest numeric digit is 9, the alphabet must be used. So once we count from 0 to 9, we're going to start using the letters A through F. So an example here, I put A is equal to 10, B is equal to 11, and so on up to 15. With just two digits, 256 combinations are possible, 16 times 16. That means that each byte can be represented by just two hexadecimal digits, each of which stands for 4 bits of memory. These 4-bit units are smaller than a byte, so they are known as nibbles. Since programmers often find that hexadecimal numbers are easier to use than binary or decimal numbers, numbers in machine language are most often written in hexadecimal. A $sign denotes that a hexadecimal value will follow. We will see examples of these when we start writing programs. Below is a simple example of H and decimal digits. Actually, I meant to put hex. So I put down here to show you, this is kind of a chart going from 0 to 20. You can see the value 0 is already 0. As I said, from 0 to 9, you're always going to have the same numbers. 1 is 1, 2 is 2, 3 is 3, and so on. And when you get down to 10, however, you start using the A in place of the 10, and then you just start counting with that forward. So A is 10, B is 11, C is 12, D is 13, and then E is 14, F is 15, and then it kind of flips back, moving the 1 back and the 0. Remember, we saw the binary base system, so it's very similar. And then it goes 16, 17, all the way up to 20. Of course, they go all the way up to, well, in the Commodore 64, 65, 535. And in the bytes, they only go up to 255, as we learned. So you also see I've got my calculator here in the background. It's hidden there a little bit. You can use the Windows calculator to convert numbers from hexadecimal to decimal if you are still getting used to them as I am. Just be sure to set the calculate mode to programmer, and I'll show you this in a second. You can do this by clicking the View menu and select Programmer, or just press Alt plus the 3 key. Below is an example of hexadecimal, and then using the radio buttons on the right to select DEC, you will see the decimal value. So I'm just going to show it to you real quick here. So I have it cleared out here. So if I want to look up a value, for example, let's say I wanted to look up 64. So we know that that's, when you type it in, it's already set the decimal. Oh, and actually let me reset the calculator. So when it starts, you're going to see, this is in Windows 7, how it looks like calculator. Just go to View and just hit Programmer. And immediately it'll take you back there. I'll put a 64 back in. And what you do, in this version, Windows 10 is a lot easier on this one, but this is Windows 7 I have. So in Windows 7, you have to click the little buttons here. And notice how it changed to the 40. So that's what the hex 40 would look like. Remember to have the $ in front of it when you're writing it in machine language. And then you've got octal, we won't go into that. And then binary, you can see these are all the digits as the computer would see them. So if you wanted to just try like an off one, for example, let's try 31. I think that might do it. Yeah, actually, trying to find an off digit here. Let's see. So here's the hex for it, C8. Yeah, there you go. You can see there's extra ones in there's now. So basically it starts incrementing, and I won't show how that's done. We're not going to learn how to count in binary because I don't really have a whole lot of time here. So if you are also curious of how to do the conversion yourself, I've included some information found in the resource book. So here, I found this in, I think this was machine language, pretty sure it was Jim Butterfield's book, the one I showed you earlier, this one right here. Mr. Butterfield's book, and he breaks it down to show how the calculations are done. And this is calculating it from hex to decimal. So step 1, you take the leftmost digit. If it's the letter A to F, convert it to the appropriate numeric value. A equals 10, B equals 11, and so on. Step 2, if there are no more digits, you're finished. You have the number stop. So you can see it's kind of an increment. So if there's no more digits left, you stop right there. Step 3, you multiply the value so far by 16, add the next digit to the result, convert in numbers if needed, or letters if needed. Go back to step 2. So you're just basically going from left to right as you're converting the digits, and then you're taking that digit, calculating it, and then you're multiplying by 16, and I think you add it and then multiply or whatever. Yeah, so you're basically just following the instructions here, and then that's how it's done. And then the last step after you do the 16, you add the next digit to the result, convert the letters if needed, go back to step 2. Okay, and in this example, using the above step, let's convert the number 12AC. I'll put it over here, but I won't show you the decimal yet for it, but there's 12AC. So here's step 1. The leftmost digit is 1. In step 2, there are more digits, so we'll continue. Step 3, 1 times 16 is 16 plus 2 gives 18. More digits to come in step 2. Step 3 is 18 times 16 is 288, plus 10 for A gives 298. Step 2 is more digits to come. Step 3 is 298 times 16 is 4768, plus 12 for C gives 4780. And step 2, there's no more digits, so 4780 is the decimal value. And of course, you'll see the result here too. That's what we got. Using the Windows calculator, you can see the octagonal and binary values. I have included a screenshot showing 127 in binary. So if you go here, we could just sit there and type 127. I think I might have done that one earlier. And you'll see it's all ones. So it's all filled in. All the bits are on. And I got this from Map and Commodore 64 Machine Language from Beginners. Okay, so back to some more chips. The chip can see the entire 64K of memory. If you want to use more, you will have to do something called bank switching. However, this is better reserved for another tutorial. Essentially, bank switching allows you to access large portions of memory thanks to the 6526 Complex Interface Adapter Chip number 2. CIA number 2 below is a picture of that chip for reference. So here's the CIA number 2 chip, as it would look if you looked in your computer. So the next part is going to get into the instructions. So I'm going to cut this video off so that we can separate this finally. The first video, all I really wanted to do was talk about the document and really kind of explain, you know, where this material is coming from and just how the computer puts things together, how it gets from, you know, from one step to the next step and so on. So the whole point is understanding binary memory and all the things that we discussed and how the chips operate. So I may be skipping over some information, but like I said, I'm pulling this from several different books, so I'm trying to be as thorough as I can. And I've got some information even off of Google. So yeah, that's going to be about it for this session. I'm glad I hit 25 minutes, a little over 25 minutes, or not too bad. And the next session, we're going to actually start going into explaining what are called the mnemonics, or the operands, and the operators and the operands, so that we can really start writing some code eventually. But I'm just going to break it down in little steps so we can take it little by little, because it's a lot to digest. And I still have a long way to go. I mean, even that document, I'm not even one fifth or whatever, 1/8 or whatever, even close. I'm pretty far away. I still have a long way to go. And like I said, I'm mostly modeling it after that one book I showed you, which is going to fall on the floor here. This one is the main book I'm modeling, because it looks really old, but this one is actually well written, although it uses some pretty outdated routines. I had to convert some of them because I used a different compiler. But it's very, very thorough, even down to electronic level. I really like it, so decided to use that one. So I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. Hit me up with comments on what you think and where we're going with this. I'm going to try to get more of these videos out as I can. I've actually got the document written here now, so I can probably throw another video out, if not today or tomorrow or soon enough. And eventually we'll start writing code. We'll start getting into programs. We'll be using the Vice monitor to look at the values and stuff like that. And we'll do it all very professionally. We'll look at the status register flags. You'll learn about all that later too. So thanks for watching, guys. Please, as always, I appreciate your favorites, likes, subscribes to this channel, and just sharing the good news, or just sharing the news about this channel will help me grow more and to reach more people. Now, on another level, I want to mention that I am still looking for people to join the Machine Language Project right now. I'm still looking for people who've got some scrolling experience for right now, and maybe rasters later, but eventually we're going to cover a lot of this when we start going through this guide. So you guys have a great day.